Hey everyone, welcome back. We are going to update you on a couple of things. And the first one is, I think, maybe just a personal beef that we need to get out of the way. We've had a ton of comments telling us that we were wrong about Samsung still having manufacturing facilities in China. So we're going to discuss that a little bit today. Also, we'll update you on the news that Broadcom might lose Google as a customer. Oh, and actually, the top thing I wanted to get out of the way here was a comment that someone left and called Nick a pear face. So I'm going to put up a pair. We're going to do a side by side. And again, I would like some viewers to give us some feedback. Is this really accurate? I don't know. Let me hear it from the people.
Yeah, I see it a bit. And actually, it was more than one comment too, Casey. It was like a whole gaggle of commenters that really hated our video on Huawei a couple of weeks ago. And I think they all conspired to call me Pearface, but it's okay. It's cool. I can see it. I can see their point.
Either way, we just want to reiterate that this is a non-biased channel. We are giving the news as we see it, and we're discussing what works for our portfolio. And so please, everyone, if you have some very strong opinions, we really just appreciate just a nice deep breath, and we'll all try to just get along on this. We do really appreciate all of you coming to watch our videos and subscribing to the channel. Let's talk about Samsung's manufacturing facilities and whether or not all of them have moved out of China.
Okay, so this came up in the context of, again, the Huawei video and Qualcomm potentially going to lose business in China because of this new Huawei chip that is actually very advanced. The Mate 60 Pro looks like a very good phone, a really solid flagship device. Congrats on that. A big manufacturing leap forward for China. In the context of that conversation, I mentioned Samsung manufacturing in China and lots of comments about no, Samsung left China in 2019, which is true to a certain extent. This is where I think we need to clear the air, I think, because there's just general misunderstanding of how this works still. I guess that means, Casey, you and I still have work to do here on this channel. So here it goes. Here's what did leave China in 2019. Samsung decided to move its smartphone assembly operations out of China and moved it to Vietnam, to India. A lot of device companies have been moving final assembly of their devices out of China to countries like this, where there's lower wages and saves them some money. They've been here for decades. This is what Samsung did. And because of that, and a misunderstanding of what exactly left the country, this is where the comments came in that we're wrong. We don't know what we're talking about. Some even nastier things said, and we do. Okay. This was an accurate statement. Samsung does still have manufacturing in China. Okay. If you don't believe us, or if we are in fact wrong, don't take it up with us. Email or get in touch somehow with Samsung's PR department. Okay. Because Casey, show the people what's on Samsung's website.
Okay, here are the manufacturing centers located in China. We have Xi'an, Suzhou, and Tianjin. And I apologize if I said any of those incorrectly. But Nick, tell us what these manufacturing facilities are doing if they're not doing the final assembly of phones.
Okay, so the Xi'an facility is memory chips. So Samsung, one of the big three memory makers, that's one of their facilities in Xi'an. So chip manufacturing. Suzhou is chip packaging. And then Tianjin is LED displays. They manufacture displays for everything from TVs to smartphones, whatever. So here's a little bit more context here. Now that, we made the reply on the last video, Samsung does have manufacturing in China, but a little more context. Someone must have looked up and saw the memory factory in Xi'an and continue to argue that, okay, but that has nothing to do with Qualcomm because Qualcomm's own annual report from its last fiscal year says that many of their sales go to companies based in South Korea that have packaging in China. This is a reference to Samsung, one of Qualcomm's biggest customers. So, yes, the memory chip making facility has nothing to do with Qualcomm. It does not buy Qualcomm chips, obviously, but the chip packaging facility in Suzhou does. Okay. So, chip packaging is when you take chips, package them up onto, let's say, a circuit board, and then you ship that component to, say, Vietnam, where it gets assembled into the final smartphone and then sold in different markets around the world. Here's the Qualcomm annual report, the paragraph once again that reiterates this. So you have two sources here: Samsung's own reports showing their facilities in China, still very much in China manufacturing, and Qualcomm itself also saying they sell chips to China that Samsung and others package up and eventually assemble into a phone to be sold not necessarily in China, but eventually sold in markets everywhere, in the United States, in Europe, South America, wherever Samsung devices can be found, which is basically everywhere. Okay. So that's what's going on, folks. Does that make sense? I think maybe the semiconductor flowchart might help a little bit, Casey.
Many big tech companies do not only do one thing, they have their hands in many of these portions of the semiconductor industry, such as Samsung. It fits into this designer category as well as an IDM. They have chip packaging, and of course, they provide tech devices. So it's a huge conglomerate that Samsung provides services for, and many of these large tech companies do the same thing. They have their hands in a lot of the portions of the industry flow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Casey, speaking of big tech companies extending their tendrils into parts of the semiconductor supply chain, and maybe just leave your flowchart up here while we talk about this section. An article broke late, I think it was on the 21st of September, from The Information, reporting that Google wants to part ways with Broadcom on development of its TPUs, or tensor processing units. Those are the custom chips that Google uses in certain AI workloads. Casey, we think this is interesting timing. We're obviously not the source of this information from The Information. They had some inside sources that they referenced in their article, sources that supposedly worked at Google that were making this claim. But we talked about this actually. Well, we talked about this multiple times, but maybe in the context of the last video we did on this topic, what exactly it was this media outlet talking about? What is Google up to?
Broadcom has mentioned multiple times in their earnings reports a big computing offload customer. And they don't discuss who this is, but it's definitely possible that it could be Google. And at this point, I think we can safely say that that's exactly who it is.
Yeah, we posited that it was most likely Google. It could have been some other tech giant, maybe Meta, maybe Microsoft, but most likely Google because they have the TPUs, a pretty well developed ecosystem of custom silicon. As we know, Amazon also has that, but they have Annapurna Lab. This is probably custom design work that Broadcom is helping with. And what this refers to, computing offload, it's maybe you have like a big data center and it's general purpose use, but you have a special workload that needs a special type of chip. And so you take this workload, you divert it from the main data center and have these special chips or special part of the data center set up and have it work on that custom, on that specific workload. And so you end up having these switches, these networking chips that Broadcom specializes in, that helps figure out, okay, where's this workload going versus maybe the main data center infrastructure. There's kind of two prongs to this. Broadcom has the networking piece, but it seems like also these TPUs they're involved with designing as well. And so the information, their sources were saying that the TPUs that Google was looking to part ways with and possibly take it to Marvell, baby Broadcom, as we like to call it. We own both. Marvell has this big custom silicon unit, and it sounded like they've been trying to undercut Broadcom and get some of this business. Later in the day, and the very same day, Google came out and said, no, this is not true. These reports are not true. We have good engagement still with Broadcom. But at any rate, it seemed like you said, Casey, this is now inadvertently confirmed that it's Google that's the big compute offload customer that we hear about. In the last earnings call, it was Bank of America analyst Vivek Arya that asked about this. And of course, CEO Hock Tan is always mum on mentioning who it is.
Well, that gives us a little bit of insight into Broadcom's business model as well as some possibility for Marvell in the future. Another point to bring out, Nick, is that Broadcom CEO Hock Tan thinks merchant silicon, off the shelf, general purpose chips tend to win the day over custom silicon, like what all the tech giants are working on these days. But they all try to do the designs anyways. They all tend to need help from a chip designer like Broadcom either way.
We did that video a couple months ago now at this point, Casey. I think maybe that would be good to drop here if you missed that and what Hock Tan was talking about. And the reason is it can be very expensive to design and then tape out and manufacture these custom chips. And then where it gets really expensive is then you need to like start the cycle all over again because you can't just design a chip once and call it good. You got to keep upgrading it and optimizing it and improving its performance. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. So it gets very expensive. Merchant silicon tends to be cheaper, especially if you're buying in bulk from a company like Broadcom, because they're handling all of the engineering for you. You just buy it, like you said, Casey, off the shelf, you install it in the data center, and you're good to go. At any rate, Broadcom's still more than happy to take the custom engineering money off of Google's hands. And that's what Marvell is going after. It was interesting to me, Casey, the initial report when it came out, Broadcom stock fell pretty hard. Marvell stock jumped quite a bit. And then I think two things happened. First, Google came out and said, nope, engagement with Broadcom is still good. And second, the claim was that this wasn't going to happen if Google parted ways with Broadcom. It wasn't going to happen until 2027 at the earliest. Pretty long ways off. The market was a little bit jumpy last week because of the Fed interest rates. It was an unhappy, brief period of time for Broadcom shareholders to hear something like that.
This all sounds a lot like the Apple is going to cut Broadcom and Qualcomm reports. Apple renewed with both anyways, because now, according to those reports, Apple still has a long ways to go to match Broadcom and Qualcomm's RF modem and Wi-Fi prowess.
Yeah, another recent report that I saw, Casey, said something to the effect that Apple's 5G modem that they came up with to potentially, get rid of, at least in part, get rid of Qualcomm and or Broadcom, took up like half of the iPhone, like the internal space of the iPhone. Obviously, that's not going to cut it. One of our viewers, actually, I won't mention who because I didn't get permission to mention who it is, but he also made a point to me that I thought was interesting as well about this. Apple has now renewed with Broadcom and Qualcomm for a few more years, supply agreements for a few more years. And at this point, this takes us out to 2025, 2026 at a minimum. Now, at this point, Apple, and let's throw Google into this bucket too, potentially doing some work to cut these companies out of the mix. And just using the 5G modems as an example, by 2026, we're like starting to get just a few years away from potentially having 6G. This is way premature to say that because like the 5G upgrade cycle is still pretty early on in most markets out there. And now here we are mentioning 6G. This is the problem with big tech trying to save money. Sometimes you can have so much cash on hand, you don't know what to do with it, that you start thinking things like, oh, we might as well throw a few $1 billion a year at this project. And maybe eventually it'll save us even more money. And really, in fact, like you would have been better off just maybe buying back your stock or paying a dividend because you have great supply partners already doing a great job for you. At any rate, though, Apple probably also just hates Qualcomm, bitterly hates Qualcomm because of the legal spats they've had with each other over the years. So they're going to try to do it anyways, whatever.
I guess we will close this out. And most of our viewers might know that we own positions in all of the companies that we mentioned today. We will see you here again at Chipstock Investor. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we have some more great stuff coming up for you real soon. So stay tuned.